great session at Harmony. Tonight we are lucky and blessed to have Christina Sapien Etsy tonight with us, a counselor, licensed counselor out of Durham, North Carolina, from Lubbock, Texas, a graduate from Baylor. She is a great, compassionate counselor. She describes herself as Latinx and a Spanish-speaking counselor who is LGBTQIA plus friendly, and she believes that culture plays a major important part in both the healing process and counseling in general. So we are very lucky to have her tonight to talk through a very important issue around anxiety and anxiousness and how to just be the most productive, happy versions of ourselves in this world we're in. So thank you, Christina.
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here today. And yes, I think this is such an important topic. So thank you for realizing the importance and having this opportunity to have this discussion.
Yeah, so thank you. So what today we'll have a couple of questions. We'll talk through kind of an interview style, and if people have questions, please write those in the chat as we have this discussion, and we'll get to some Q&A at the end of the discussion. So just starting off, Christina, one of the big things that people have questions about is, what's the difference between anxiety, anxiousness, depression, and just understanding, sometimes we don't see these things necessarily as these labels that they have, but how do we see those things kind of manifest?
Yeah, I think a lot of times one thing to always remember also is that everybody experiences anxiety, depression to varying degrees, but we all are emotional human beings. So, one thing to also remember is that we all experience emotions. Obviously, I think our relationship to emotions can be very complicated depending on how we learned about our emotions. And so I think that's important. But yes, anxiety can be when somebody is feeling nervous, having trouble relaxing, just overthinking situations. Or just thinking a lot. I think a lot of times anxiety can increase when there are moments of uncertainty or the unknown, not knowing what's going to happen. Obviously, I think that can increase people's anxiety. So again, the fact that we are seeing an increase in anxiety at this point in our lives, like or where we are at right now, is I think a natural occurrence to what we're all experiencing in this time.
Mhm. And so, when we start to try to think of this, what are ways that are commonly seen as how anxiety or anxiousness may manifest itself, that we should either be paying attention to or that we may not notice is an actual symptom of this issue?
Yeah, so again, anxiety can kind of present itself in a lot of different ways. And so there can be smaller things such as just this like worrying or just overthinking situations or just trying to figure out how to yeah, manage some of those things can be hard. So again, if you're experiencing this kind of worry and nervousness and anxiety, but you don't feel like you have the tools to like manage it, then it can kind of increase from there. It can actually, manifest itself in physical aspects where people will describe having, panic attacks where there's like shortness of breath. Um, like a shallow breathing, rapid heartbeat. So sometimes people will actually feel the physical symptoms of anxiety before even realizing kind of what's going on. And so that would be more of a panic attack kind of aspect of anxiety. But anxiety can present itself in so many different ways. You can have trouble sleeping. Um, so a lot of different things in that regard. And I don't think I quite like with the first answer. I mean, the first question you asked about depression, I didn't quite talk about that. But
Mhm.
so I kind of think about anxiety of like the unknowns, like not knowing so, like, kind of worrying maybe about the future, not knowing what's going to happen in the future, worrying and thinking about different scenarios that might play out. So, that's a lot of time and energy that's dedicated to that. I think a certain amount of worry and anxiety can be helpful in the sense of like meeting deadlines, making changes, doing things that need to be done. But after that, making a plan, after that, I think it can definitely overwhelm you, because again, wasting time and energy on scenarios or situations that might not even happen. And so kind of rallying yourself up. And then with depression, I think of as like, it can be, sadness. It can be also affect your appetite, also affect your sleep patterns. No, like not a lot of motivation to do things. And I also feel like sometimes if we're looking at like the past or thinking about things in the past, sometimes feeling stuck there can lead to depression. So, having thoughts of like, I wish certain things would have been different in my life. I wish I didn't have to experience certain things. Or even right now, the loss of what our lives looked like prior to this. So, looking back and feeling stuck there, I think can sometimes lead to feelings of depression.
And I think that's a great point that you make. I mean, what do you suggest to people when they feel like they're losing that type of control? I mean, there's been so many things that's happened, whether to your point, COVID or social justice issues with police brutality or detention centers, and these things that we continue to see, especially within diverse communities. What do you suggest in trying to control, the environment that feels like it's out of control?
Yeah, so I think there are so many issues right now that everybody is, I think, trying to understand how to manage. And so I feel like overall, in general, not only are we individually experiencing a lot of stress, but I think collectively, as a community, as a country, our heightened level of like stress and anxiety is just higher. So I
Mhm.
think that that is shining a light on um, your coping skills and how do you manage all this stress, all this uncertainty. um, and so one of the things that I think is extremely important, I think that we all have a certain amount of defense mechanisms that kick in when we're stressed out. And so sometimes there's avoidance.
Mhm.
Sometimes we want to avoid and distract ourselves from things that are happening. I feel like a certain level of that is healthy. But I definitely feel like initially you do have to check in with yourself. You have to make sure that you are aware of like what you are experiencing. So checking in and recognizing and validating whatever emotions are coming up for you at the time, and not trying to dismiss them or disregard them because those emotions are there for a reason. If you're feeling angry, there is a reason that you're feeling angry, and figuring out like how can I use that anger um, to channel that to do something that maybe I do have control over. Going out to vote, getting involved in things that are important for you. So again, things that you can control. Obviously, again, there are so many things out of our control. Um, I think that a lot of people are experiencing this social isolation of, how do I stay connected with people um, during this time when we are, again, social human beings, where we need that social interaction. And so, how do you do that? And what does it look like? I think sometimes we've become used to just kind of hunkering down and staying in our homes. We're working at our homes. We can have things delivered to our homes. Like we really don't have to leave if we don't want to. But I definitely feel like there are safe things that people can do to get out of their homes, to get some fresh air, to get outside, to participate in physical activities if that's something that brings them happiness and joy. There's ways to reach out and be connected with people that we love.
Mhm.
And I think it is harder, I think, for people that aren't with their families, or people, I'm thinking some college students are, in dorms or possibly in apartments. They don't have like a family unit that they're living with. And so it's about being intentional about creating those um, connections.
Yeah. And actually, it's interesting. One of the big things that we're thinking about now is that we're coming into the holiday season, and there's a lot of information around trying not to go home to spread COVID, or trying to stay away from family members so that we can help not have this issue for longer than we need. But that's big for, especially for people who are from community, want to have that community aspect. How do you suggest as we move into this holiday season? How do we plan going forward for perhaps a different type of holiday season than we've had before? Maybe a more isolated holiday season.
Yeah, I really do feel like you have to do again what you feel comfortable doing and making sure that you are, again, feeling safe and that other people are safe and minimizing risks. So I think it is important to first and foremost do what you feel is going to make you comfortable, and then also figuring out a plan. And I know that people are trying to figure this out right now. Like, what does that look like? Where am I going? What do I need to do in preparations for that? Do I need to, minimize my risk before going to see family? Do I need to, so again, what does that look like? How can I do things and do them, safely? And then also, if it does look different than what it looked like before, is acknowledging again that emotion that this isn't, the best of times, and that this is hard. But also trying to find ways that it can be different, but it doesn't mean it has to be bad. So you have to also maybe be creative and find some ways to do things in a creative way. Yeah. So I don't know, Anthony, if we've talked about it, but I have two kids. So,
Mhm.
7 and 3. Halloween's coming up. Yeah,
Yeah.
Halloween is going to look very different. And figuring out like how do we still celebrate this, how do we still make it fun, knowing that it's not going to be the way we traditionally celebrate. So kind of thinking outside the box, figuring out different ways that you can do things to still enjoy this period of time, without feeling overwhelmed or too too upset that it's not going to look the way that it might normally look for you.
Okay, that makes sense. Just kind of shifting gears a little bit. I know you talked a little bit about how some of these feelings can manifest themselves. Um, how do we think about, I've had conversations. I've been in school. We've all been in school before, and we have this conversation with ourselves. That's the stress of whatever it may be is what drives us to success, or it's the stress of us working day and night that actually makes us successful. How do we start to change that mindset to make it so that we're living a more healthy, more mentally balanced life?
This is a challenge because I feel like our society obviously is based on this way of working, that like you work, 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 you put in this time and effort. If you want to succeed, you have to sacrifice.
Mhm.
And so I think that obviously I don't feel like that's the healthiest way to succeed. And it's also your definition of success. What is success to you? Is it climbing the corporate ladder? Is it having a balanced life where work is not the center of your life? And so I think it is like figuring out what that looks like for you. I also feel like women have, again, this juggling act of, and men do too, but like the fact of like wanting, and can we have it all? Can we have a successful career? Can we have a family? Can we manage all these things? And I think that it is getting harder and harder, but I think it's the pressures that we face as a society. And so I think again, this is in a way a societal issue. Um, but I think we can't control necessarily how the system works. But you can definitely set boundaries for yourself as far as how much. And I think that that's tricky when you're starting your career, because you
Mhm.
want to be seen as competent and capable and take on the challenge. And like you, so you're young and you want to sign up for all of the things and you want to show like how much you're able to take on and do. But sometimes you just burn yourself out and you realize like, is this what I want for my life? And so figuring out as a young professional, like, what do I want my life to look like? Do I want it just to be work? Do I want to have some more balance where I'm not just identified by what I do?
Mhm.
And so I think it is important to set boundaries, to be able to say like, yeah, I'll answer emails from this time to this time, but after that, like that's my time to do the things I need to do or the things I want to do. So I definitely think. it's hard initially to set those boundaries because you want to go out and show, the world what you can do. But I think in time, it is important to learn that sometimes you have to pull back and sometimes you need to say no, and not be so afraid of saying no, but understanding that that can be a healthy thing for you to do.
And that's a great point. And how do we start? How do we start to build ourselves up for that confidence to say no, especially if we're talking careers today where you're not sure if you're going to have that job next day, or if your internship is going to turn into a full-time offer, those types of things. How do we start to cope or start to build around that confidence? And this could also lead into just feeling our self-worth in this situation.
Yeah, because I definitely feel like there are young professionals and anybody that is working that you can be taken advantage of in the sense of like given more and given more, and then you like, and it's always like you're proving yourself, and so they're like, oh, she can handle it. Go ahead and give that project to her. Let her do that. And again, I think it's important to um, feel confident in your work and in the things that you're accomplishing, and to know, yes, I think self-worth, to know your worth, that like you are going to be there and give 100% when you're there, but there
Mhm.
are times that you need to step away and take care of other responsibilities and take care of yourself, because you aren't going to be able to, some of that isn't sustainable. So you want to make sure you're able to take care of yourself so you can be more productive. If you're burnt out and you're dragging and you've been working so hard that you cannot focus and you cannot do the work, then that's not going to be sustainable and you're not going to be producing your best work. So I think a lot of times we feel like it's selfish, to take this time to like take care of ourselves or do the things that we need to do. But it's taking care of yourself so you can do the things that you love to do, so you can be 100% at your job, so that, because if you're dragging and you're only producing 40%, that's not going to be a good representation of who you are and the kind of work that you can produce.
That makes sense. And I think what's important today, especially, is that we spend a lot of time comparing ourselves to others. How do we start to make sure that we are presenting what we want and not necessarily just kind of following the herd or the group kind of mentality?
That, yeah, I think a lot of times right now, especially with social media, and it's hard not to see somebody else, their life through that lens,
Mhm.
and be like, oh wow, like they're doing great things, but we don't know the full story, obviously, and so I think that it is hard to not compare ourselves to others, but needing to step back, either again creating boundaries around what you're seeing with social media. I think right now too, a lot of times people have to pull back and set boundaries around what they're allowing themselves in regards to the news,
Mhm.
because it's just a lot of information coming at us. And I think that, one of the things that I think is extremely, extremely important is that I think that we are so hard on ourselves and we can expect so much out of ourselves. And when we do not meet these expectations, that we can talk to ourselves in such a negative way.
Mhm.
And it's important to recognize like when we're having those negative thoughts about ourselves or putting ourselves down, or saying like, oh, you look at them, like they're accomplishing great things, or even like right now with COVID, I hear a lot of people saying like, wow, there's some people out there living their best life and here I am hunkering down trying to like be safe, and it just doesn't seem fair. So even in those situations, like I think it's again, um, telling ourselves like, yes, that things are not okay right now, but I'm doing the best that I can. Or again, acknowledging like how you're speaking to yourself. Are you speaking to yourself with kindness and compassion, the way that you would talk to a friend? Um, the way sometimes we might even talk to a stranger is kinder and more compassionate than the way that we might speak to ourselves.
Mhm.
And so learning to like treat ourselves with kindness and compassion, and be gentle with ourselves, because again, we're not perfect, we're going to make mistakes, and it's a matter of allowing ourselves that space to do that and not being overly hard or judgmental.
Okay. And I guess one of the final questions around that kind of topic is, for diverse people, whether that's gender, ethnically, or sexuality, or whichever way that we define diversity. Oftentimes we see ourselves as kind of that torchbearer who has to shoulder the burden. And so we end up either feeling like we have to work twice as hard to get half as much, or just making sure that we're perfect all the time. How do we start to kind of reset that thought process? Or how do we start to look at that in a more healthy way so that, to your point, to be more sustainable and to help with these issues?
Yeah, I think again, we have received so many messages ever since we were little. Messages about our identity, messages about who we are, messages about what we're expected to be and what we're expected to do. And yes, I think that, you know, older generations handled situations differently than we are now in our generation. And I think, some of the things that I was told as a Latina is, yeah, you have to work hard, you have to keep your head down, you don't make any waves, you just work hard and you show them like how hard you're going to work.
Mhm.
And yes, you work hard, but you also need to recognize that there are inequalities, and sometimes there are things that we can do that are within our power and our control to voice some of those things, but also having a safe place where you can speak to safe people that will also validate and acknowledge that yes, it is going to be harder at times because some of these systems were not created for people like us. And it's this challenge of, do I change myself and who I am to fit the system? Or should I try and stay as true as possible to myself and allow myself to go into the system and try to make the system understand where I'm coming from? And that's a struggle. I mean, that is hard.
Mhm.
But I think it is important, again, to have people that will validate those experiences to say, yes, what happened? Because you can second guess yourself. You can leave a work situation or leave a school situation and be like, that seemed weird or off. Like, am I crazy? Because this didn't seem right. This didn't feel right to me. And then having somebody to say, like, no, that wasn't right. And yes, you are right. Like, that was a microaggression, or that was, and helping you to validate, yes, I have a right to feel this way.
Right. One of the things that, with this environment, even with us now, having to work virtually, whether that's school or work, that adds another layer of that socialization issue, or just trying to figure things out going forward. What is your advice there for, building your safe space within your home, or building a space where you can also continue to relax but also work diligently as you need to?
Yeah, I think that, again, pre-COVID, there was obviously more of a separation, and you had some transition time. Um, from home to transition to work to get prepared for the day, and then transition or to school, and then transition time from school or work to transition back home, and those were two separate spaces and two separate places. Now obviously it's combined, it's enmeshed, and so now your workplace is your home, and you can't it's like you can't separate the two, and it's so frustrating because I know some people are doing the best that they can, so they're working, in their bedrooms, or they're working in the place that brings them comfort and safety, yet there might not be comfort and safety in some of the interactions that people are having, either on their college courses or in their workspaces. And so I think that there does have to be um, some kind of way to separate, some kind of, maybe a routine to prepare to enter the work, your work day, maybe some kind of routine or something you can do as you wrap up and end your work day to transition back to home. I think, again, boundaries are going to be so important. I know it's hard to not check in email or follow up on something, but it's important to just be like, you know what, I gave my job the time that was necessary, and now this is my time. I'm not going to check that email, I'm not going to return that phone call. I will take care of it tomorrow during work hours. And so I think, again, creating like a safe place for yourself that maybe, um, working in a certain place and that's where work is and that's where you
Mhm.
go to work, but not having it kind of invade the rest of your home, which I know is hard to do sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. So for the audience, we're gonna have probably one more question, and then gonna turn it to you. So add your questions into the chat, and we can ask Christina here. But Christina, one of the other things that have come up, and we talked a little bit about it, um, in not so many words, but the concept of imposter syndrome or imposterism. Can you talk to us a little bit about what that is, and kind of give us a thoughts around either overcoming it or identifying it as we see it in ourselves and our environment.
Yeah, I feel like again, anytime you're venturing out into something new, whether it's entering college, starting a new career, a new job, whatever might be new is going to obviously feel uncomfortable and it's going to you're going to have feelings of anxiety. Even when you're in the workplace, you might be like, oh, I don't know if I am prepared for this. I don't know if I'm ready to take on some of these challenges. So I think that it is you're very quick to like again be kind of hard on yourself, or if you make a mistake. I think it's hard right now in our society to feel okay with making mistakes, that is part of the learning process, that you're learning and growing and mistakes are okay to make. um, but again, I think sometimes it is the way you speak to yourself, the way you manage those feelings of saying like this makes sense why I would feel this way, like validating that experience, and then again figuring out ways that you can build your confidence up in saying like I'm learning, this is going to take me time, but hopefully if I continue to work hard and do the things I need to do, this will, I can show that I'm able to do these things. And so again, building yourself up, giving yourself, um, speaking kindly to yourself, not trying not to be too hard. And I think that there's varying degrees of the imposter syndrome, because I definitely also feel like people of color or other people who have not necessarily maybe been welcomed into certain spaces, I think that's another layer of feeling like, um, and if you walk into a space of your employment and you're the only person of color, obviously you're going to feel a little like, oh, this feels uncomfortable, this feels different. So again, there's times that maybe those spaces weren't open to you before, so that's another layer of having to say like, yes, that might not be the case, but I'm here now, and I have a lot to contribute, and I might not always get it right and I might not always be perfect, but I'm here to do the best that I can.
No, thank you. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. We're now opening up for the questions in the chat, and so we do have one that has came. So they said that they recently lost a loved one, and prior, they're starting to avoid talking to friends on the phone, but they're fine spending time in person, but they don't feel energized really to communicate when they're not in person. Do you have any suggestions on, especially for someone who may have been different prior to this, just thinking through how to heal in that way and move forward and kind of get back to what may have been your old self.
Yeah. So losing a loved one is very difficult, and the grieving process takes time. And it is hard because there are so many different emotions that somebody goes through when they've lost a loved one. And there can be, sadness, and then also there are normal things that people might go through in grieving somebody. But you also have to be aware that like, is am I feeling this sadness regarding this loss, or is it slipping into something else? Like, could it possibly, be depression? Because the other aspect is again like we're experiencing such a high level of stress and anxiety just in general, that any other stressor or any other thing coming at us can be very overwhelming. So it is about like figuring out, listening to yourself, figuring out what it is that you're experiencing, what you're feeling, and also figuring out what is it that I need, and how can I meet those needs? What are things that I can do to take care of myself? And then what are things that I need to ask of other people to help support me as I'm trying to take care of these things that I'm experiencing. And that's, with grieving, but also anything that we're experiencing right now. There are certain things that we need to do to take care of ourselves and to notice that. and not dismiss it like, oh, it's not a big deal. I should be fine by now. I should just suck it up and do these things. But it's about being, again, like, no, this is really difficult and I need to allow myself time and space to heal from this really difficult situation that I'm experiencing.
Yeah. And I guess a follow up question that I have, just in this time, it's harder today on people who aren't able to say those last goodbyes because of COVID. What do you suggest, when you have those feelings that's come up, when you just physically can't make amends for something like that?
Yeah, it is a hard time. A lot of people aren't able to be there with their loved ones. And it adds another layer of like the frustration and the anger and the sadness of this, that it had to be this way. And so it is important to acknowledge like this is really hard. And so I think that there are things to do that can, like, I don't know, I'm thinking also like there might be smaller ways that you, because you might not, yeah, have a funeral, so there might be smaller ways to honor that relationship that you may have had with that individual. So like making sure that you're, again, not trying to avoid or distract yourself from those emotions or those feelings, because that sometimes is our defense mechanism. I just don't want to think about it. I just want to put it in a box and just like deal with something else. um, but creating that time and space of like writing a letter or having the things that maybe you cherished with that individual, things that maybe were special between you and them, as a way of honoring their life and a way of feeling connected to them, even though they're no longer here.
Okay. We have a question from someone who's asking, from your point of view of a mother, what are some of the things that you're doing to find the balance between taking care of your kids and your own personal well-being?
Whew, this is a hard one. It is hard. It is so hard. And so I think I think again, we all have some things that are some of our strengths. And so it's funny because some of my strengths are to push through, to you chuck along, you just like keep going, like it's like trying to just keep it up, keep doing what you need to be doing. And it's almost like also not acknowledging your struggle. And I feel like this is another very valid point. I feel like because um I tend to also, and I think this is something a lot of people tend to do, is we're grateful, for the things that we have. And so we say like, oh, I'm just so grateful that like my kids are here with me, we're healthy. I'm grateful that I have a home, that I'm able to work, or whatever the case may be. But it also, in a way, invalidates your struggle because you're like, I'm not homeless, I'm not like food insecure. And yes, like it is important to keep that in perspective, but it's not healthy to like do that to dismiss your struggle, to say like this is also hard for me.
Mhm.
And so I think for me as a mom, as this started off, I was just, we're doing it, we're doing all the things. And then my daughter turned to me and was like, she's 7, she's like, mama, what do you miss about times like how they used to be? Man, that just hit me right, it got me. And I was like, gosh, there are things that I miss. And so like, acknowledging that like this is hard. And so not just trying again to disregard that and just keep going, but to acknowledge like this is really hard and I'm really struggling. When you are struggling, taking that time out when you need it, if you have a partner that you're able to like, I need a 10 minutes, I need a break, um, to separate yourself from that situation, because it is stressful and it is overwhelming. Find some moments that you can have to yourself. I know sometimes that's not always possible, and so sometimes it's after the children go to bed, allow yourself to feel that, to cry, and to know that like, man, this is really hard. And to also again be patient, because we are not, we are managing, we are surviving right now. We are not at our best, we're making mistakes. um, I am not probably the best mother right now, just because there are so many stressors, that I try really hard, but there are days that I'm not my best, and that's okay. Like I will get through it, I will do better next time. But to have that patience with ourselves as well, that when we lose it, or when we don't um, we aren't able to prepare a meal, and we're just like throwing stuff on a plate, that it's okay. Like we're just doing the best that we can and trying our hardest to just get through these days.
Yeah. That's great advice. I Another question that comes up along kind of along these same lines from the other perspective of, how do we be good friends and allies to people who may be going through issues, whether it's job loss or a loss of a family member or any of these issues? How do we check in on them without seeming overbearing and not being dismissive of kind of what they're going through?
Yeah, I think it's important to make sure you let them know, like, hey, I see that this might be a difficult time for you. Like, let me know if there's anything I can do, and just have that open that door up. So if they do need help, and sometimes again, that's the hardest thing to do is ask for help for some people. And so checking in, leaving that door open, and then if you don't hear from them for a while, hey, can I get you this or do you need this? I'm going to the grocery store. Little things that you might be able to do to help brighten their day or to just check in with them. Because I think part of also, I think that the social isolation and things that make it kind of hard is that, like, right now we're also, I think, again, all in survival mode. So we're like kind of hunkering down, taking care of ourselves, giving ourselves time and energy to just get through our days, that sometimes we don't have that extra to check in on others. But it is important to just, like, again, sometimes send a text, hey, I'm thinking about you, hope you're doing okay. And making sure that they know that, like, somebody is thinking about them, somebody is like, um, there for that you are there for them if they need anything.
And when we have those conversations with them, how do we be how do we best support them? I mean, what are the things we should avoid or about either doing or not doing? Because sometimes it could be we may be thinking we're being helpful, but it may be detrimental. So just trying to think through those things that we should or shouldn't do.
I think the important thing is, again, letting them know you're there, and to also say, because I think everybody needs support differently. Some people need time and space. Some people need, hey, I need you to check in like once a week and make sure I'm doing all right. So what that support looks like is going to be different for everyone. And so I think to say that, to say, hey, like, I really care about you. I hope that you're doing okay. I don't really know, like, maybe what the best way to support you, like, what are things that you feel that will help you feel like I'm here and that I can, ways that I can support you. So sometimes it's just asking them, and they might say, like, I don't really know, like, maybe it'd be nice if you did this. Oh yeah, I can do that. So sometimes it's just being honest and saying, like, I feel, because that can be a very helpless feeling, to want to help somebody but not knowing how, and also
Mhm.
not wanting to do something that might offend or upset them. So
Right.
it is a matter of asking and just being honest and saying, like, I want to be here for you, and I'm struggling to know how to do that. Is there anything that you can tell me, that ways that I can support you?
And how do we talk to our friends and families when we're the strong friend who people come to? How do we tell them that we need help or we are going through things? How do we talk to those people in our lives to help us as well?
Yeah. I think that if you're the one that everybody comes to, you're typically hesitant to ask for help because you don't want to burden anybody. You want people to know that you're fine, you're doing okay. And I think that it is important to find the people that you feel most comfortable, because it is a hard thing for the people that are caretakers and nurturers. Find, sometimes it's so hard that you have to have like one person that you are comfortable enough to be like, man, I am struggling, I am having a hard time, and know that that is going to be, that you're going to be given that kindness and compassion that you give you give out to other people, that you're going to have somebody there to, like, listen. Sometimes we do have people there to listen and to support, but there's something that just keeps us from letting down our guard and asking for help. And it can be very lonely and isolating in that space as well, when you're taking care of others and you don't have an outlet for that. But typically, there are people that are able to handle that. We just have to be okay with being vulnerable, and letting that guard down and that shield of like strength that I'm strong, I have it together, to say like no, I don't, and I'm struggling, and I need some additional support and additional help.
Okay. And if we have any other questions, just get them in there. But one of the things that people are asking as well is any kind of books or podcasts that you would suggest to listen to or to read, or any kind of blogs that you think would be very helpful.
Ooh, I wish I had some. I'm too busy working and taking care of my family. No, I think one of the things, I haven't reread this book in a while, but there is a book by a Buddhist nun called Pema Chodron, and it's When Things Fall Apart. And it's heart advice through difficult times. And it really talks a lot also about leaning into some of those uncomfortable emotions and leaning into some of the things that we have a tendency of wanting to run away from. So again, acknowledging it. Sometimes we feel like, again, sometimes we have to compartmentalize. Sometimes we have to put things in a box so we can work, so we can function, so we can do the things that we need to do. Um, but in the short term, that works. In the long term, that just gets heavy, and it just becomes too much to carry around. So you have to find ways to let that out, and not carry it around with you. So that's kind of some of the things that she kind of addresses or talks about. One thing I would also like to talk about, because this is coming up a lot, like in my therapy, is or in my work with clients, but I think like we are living in such hard times right now. And I think that initially when this started, it was like, oh, 3 weeks. Yeah, I can
Mhm.
hunker down. And then we started experiencing a longer period of time. And then people started feeling, that fatigue. And I think right now a lot of people are also realizing that this isn't gonna be over, anytime soon necessarily. So it's like, okay, preparing ourselves mentally for that. And I think for a period of time, there were a lot of people that's like, oh, when this is over, like I'll be able to do this, or I'll be happy again, or
Mhm.
I won't be so stressed out. But I feel like now that we're like in this place where it's taking us a lot longer to get to the other side, to get to that normal, um, we do have to find ways to find true happiness and joy right here, right now, where we're at, because we can't just wait until this all is over. Um, and so, what does that look like? So, I think it's important. Like, what brings you happiness and joy? Even if it's not like our happiness and joy nowadays can't be what it normally was. So again, being creative, finding things to do that will make you laugh. Where you're, again, like there's too much stress and too much stuff going on, that you do have to find these moments um, that bring life, like where you're at right now, joy and meaning and purpose. Whether that's like silly dance party in your living room, whatever that is, watching like a sunset or the sunrise, like actually watching it and not just like going about your day. So I feel
Mhm.
like there's small things that we can do right now that can bring us joy and happiness, that are little things that we can do, to be silly, to laugh, to do something, um, and not wait, not be like, I just have to deal with all this until these things happen. We have to find our joy and happiness now.
Yeah. No, that's a great point. I think that's also true in the normal life as well. I know I find myself thinking, once I get to this point, then I'll be happy. But living for this moment as well is very important.
Yeah.
So we do have one more question. So it's a question around kind of feeling guilty. That you're not struggling financially or dealing with health issues when other people are. How do you start to change that perspective, or how do you make that a more healthy perspective?
Yeah, like I think again, a lot of people are struggling, and you hit on a lot of different things that we're seeing right now in our society that are very sad, and difficult to understand and process. And so yes, I think that it is normal and natural to feel guilty if you're, not experiencing some of those things, or if you are able to have these 3 meals a day, that there isn't that part of you that like worries or thinks about the people that aren't experiencing that. So I feel like um, it is important to, again, feel whatever emotion you're feeling. Again, is there something you can do to contribute to organizations that are benefiting people in need? So if use that feeling, and again, do something about it if you can. If you can't, like if you're not able to also just again say like, I'm not able to do this, but my heart goes out to those people, and I'm doing again the best that I can with what I have. So trying not to again compare those struggles, because your struggle is just as important and valid as everybody else's struggle. And if you can do something that will help, like again, contribute to taking care of others, then get involved and do those things. If you can't, then again try and talk, talk gently to yourself about like, I wish I could. There's nothing I can do right now, but hoping that things get better, and doing again little things that maybe you feel like you're contributing in a way. It doesn't have to be monetary, it can be other ways of contributing that you feel is meaningful.
Okay. No, we really appreciate you taking time tonight. Any other closing thoughts that you may have, or we can get ready to wrap up? But we really do appreciate you coming tonight, Christina.
Yeah, thank you. I think again, I think this is just so important. I think that um, you know, there's that whole other thing of again just allowing yourself to feel whatever the emotion is that you're feeling. I think is so critical, and not dismissing it, not just you know, oh, I shouldn't be feeling that way. Is just truly allow yourself to feel that, and definitely again try to be gentle and kind with how you treat yourself, and then obviously gentle and kindness on how you treat other people. I think is just an important thing to remind ourselves to do.
Definitely. No, thank you, Christina. This is very helpful. And for everyone on, I hope this was super helpful as well. If you think someone else could benefit from it, we'll have the video up for a little while on the site so you can come back and get this great sage advice from Christina. So thank you very much. I think the crowd really enjoyed it. I look forward to connecting here soon again.
Yes, thank you. And thank you everyone who joined. Really appreciate you taking the time to come on here and listen. And again, also one other quick thing really fast, but if I think there's also a stigma in mental health services. So like I think that's another thing that we didn't talk about, as far as
Mm.
also like people of color
Yeah.
or cultures, that like what happens in the house stays in the
Yeah.
house. That you don't need to be going out there and telling other people your business, or that you're not crazy, you don't need that kind of help. Please access mental health services, especially during this time if you're feeling overwhelmed and isolated, because there are people out there that are there to help and to support you through this time. So, again, you're not alone, and please don't hesitate to reach out to get help if you feel like you need it.
Definitely. No, that's great advice. Thank you, Christina. Have a great night.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.